and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today on the show, we have Sandra Weitz. She is an anesthesiologist and pain management specialist, and she wrote the Kevin MD article, Fortune Favors the Bold, How a Physician Lives Up to That Motto. Sandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and journey to where you are today?
Sure. I went to BU Medical School, decided to do a surgery internship, which I did at the University of California, San Francisco, stayed and did an anesthesia residency, a pain management fellowship, and then became the director of the pain service and stayed on faculty for 5 years. Long story short, we took a pay cut every year working in academics, and I lived in San Francisco and we realized this is not going to work. So I moved cross country to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and initially joined a group who said that they wanted a pain specialist. Along the way, after about 18 months, it became apparent that they actually had no idea what a pain specialist did or what they really wanted. And so I said, okay, well, I guess I'm on my own, and went into private practice. Initially, started this practice by myself, camping out, renting space at a hospital, and ultimately went to the hospital and said, hey, I have no more hours in the day. I need to see more patients. I need to grow this thing. Can you help me? I want to form a joint venture. Can you help me bring in another physician? Their response was, we're the 1,000-bed hospital. We don't have to do that. Sorry. And I said, okay, that's fine. Left. And basically, in the end, started my own practice, built it to 11 providers, built a 25,000 square foot building to house the practice, and then ultimately a multi-specialty ambulatory surgery center, an anesthesia company, an imaging center, PT, massage, chiropractic care, psychological services, and then ultimately sold those businesses to private equity and to publicly traded companies. And here we are.
Wonderful. There's a lot to unpack there, and I'd love to go into more detail into that story. And you wrote more about that story in your Kevin MD article, Fortune Favors the Bold, How a Physician Lives Up to That Motto. Sandra, so let me ask you, so when you were at UCSF, a lot of people like that comfort of being in a large academic medical center. Now, what were some of the decision points that caused you to leave the relative safety of the academic medical center and move to Louisiana?
Well, there were a couple of things. First of all, I was very fortunate in that they appointed me to the finance committee for the Department of Anesthesia, okay? And as a result, I got to learn how to read a profit and loss statement. I came to understand how much money the department was bringing in terms of revenue. I understood what the dean's tax was, and I understood that basically our compensation was minuscule compared to the amount of revenue that we were generating, okay? At the same time, we were taking a pay cut every year. This was, 1997, 1998, height of managed care, height of when Stanford and UCSF merged, and they ultimately got divorced. But long story short, we were taking a pay cut, and I went, all right, wait a second. I live in Silicon Valley because, it's the height of the dot-com boom, and that was the place to live that was most convenient for us. I'm taking a pay cut, and I know that the department is making a lot of money on my pain service. I can do something else.
You had the benefit of reading that profit and loss statement. What about your other anesthesia colleagues who were working there? Were they aware of the financial situation they were in?
They were aware that they were taking a pay cut every year. They were not aware of how much money the department brought in until I told them. And I basically said, we're being taken advantage of. And I think that one of the most important things in this conversation with you, Kevin, is teaching people to know their numbers, to learn the business of medicine, to really be able to understand how much money do I generate, what's it actually costing to have me, and that those numbers are empowering.
And obviously you took matters into your own hands and did something about it. I'm curious, what was the reaction of most of your colleagues when you told them that?
It was really split. Half of the people were, oh my God, I can't believe you're that brave. And the other half of the people were like, you're moving where? You're leaving San Francisco and moving to Louisiana to do what? So, but now I am still in contact with a lot of those people. And I retired 5 years ago and built this huge empire. And they look at it and go, boy, I wish I had done that.
Mm-hmm. Is it fair to say at the time that you moved to Louisiana, a lot of those staff anesthesiologists just stayed on and continue to be taken advantage of financially?
Absolutely.
Now that you're in Louisiana, tell me about the genesis of your pain management practice and all the other businesses that you built down there. So how did that all get started?
So basically, the UCSF model of pain management is a multimodality, multidisciplinary model. I personally believe that pain is treated in a biopsychosocial manner. And so the practice that I had, even when I worked for the group, was not only just doing interventional pain management, but referring people to psychology services, to physical therapy. And so when I started my own practice, I kept track of who was referring patients to us, but also who we were referring out to. And it became apparent I was sending people to the MRI to see what's going on. I'm sending them to the physical therapist to be treated. And ultimately, I had no control over those experiences. And initially, it wasn't really even about money at all. It was really about the quality of care that I was able to deliver to these patients, that by bringing these services under my umbrella, then I could actually deliver a better quality of care to the patients. The patients had basically a one-stop shop. Mm-hmm. And as a result, it was a win-win. Yes, I generated revenue, my practice generated revenue for all of my partners, but also the patients ended up with a much better level of service.
Now, did you have any mentors or any training that taught you that business side of medicine in order to create what you did in Louisiana?
Not at all. I mean, honestly, it was my time on that finance committee to really come to understand how to read a profit and loss statement. After that, it has been all trial and error. I will say, however, that when I decided to build this 25,000 square foot building, I had a wonderful commercial realtor who walked me through the logistics of building a building. I had hired a consultant who did a feasibility study with me, who got me in touch with an architect who designs multi-specialty ambulatory surgery centers and actually wrote the code for that. I had amazing healthcare attorneys. But the thing is that I think for your listeners, you can't abdicate your role when you hire a consultant, okay? Mm-hmm. You have to learn to read those contracts. Yes, they read them and they tell you, but you can't just go, okay, well, I read it, you read it, so I don't have to read it. No, you have to learn all of the terms. You really have to be able to communicate with each one of these consultants that you are involved in.
Now, when you enter a relationship with one of these consultants, when you're building up the center, what are some red flags that physicians should look out for if they want to do something similarly?
It's like anything else. You have to vet them, right? Mm-hmm. You need to actually interview several of them before you decide who you're going to want to end up with. It's kind of like dating. Similarly, you need to ask for references. You want to see what other work have they done? Who have they, how much effort have they put into a project? How much effort do you have to put into micromanaging them? I will tell you that I'm a witch. And my expectation is that if I email you on Sunday, that you're going to email me back. All right. Mm-hmm. If you, and so it really is about managing your expectations of them and really coming to see whether it's a fit.
Now, obviously, what you did was very successful, but tell me some of the challenges along the way to building what you did.
So I think the biggest challenge is as you can hear and see, I'm a woman originally from the Northeast who trained in California, and I came to the Deep South. And this is truly a good old boy network. Okay, anybody who's listening who's from the South is going to tell you that. Everybody went to the same couple of schools. They all play golf together, and really trying to create a name for yourself when you are not part of that community was probably the biggest hurdle. And I ultimately did it by saying, you know what, I'm not a good old boy, but I'm going to deliver better care and better, everything for your patients. And in the end, I prevailed. But that was probably the hardest of the things when I first got here.
Now, can you share a story or an example where it showed that you were not accepted, not coming from that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So about 2 years into being here, the hospital, same hospital, invited me to come to a meeting with a group of neurosurgeons and orthopedic spine surgeons to talk about how to build a pain program for the spine guys. And there was he was probably about 60 years old, neurosurgeon, who was the head of the big group here in town. And I was describing what a multidisciplinary approach to pain looks like. And he looked at me and he said, "Young woman, that is not how we do things here." And I went, and I was the only woman in the room. So there was no mistaking who he was talking to. And there, I can tell you about another 20 stories of the same flavor.
Now, how long did it take you to be accepted in that area, and how long did it take you to build up your practice to be self-sustaining?
I got it really about 1.5 to 2 years, from the time I got here. When I first got here, I was part of this group. And that was really the way in which I got the first set of patients, and I got exposed to the first referral sources. And then really, by the time I went out on my own completely, I already had a pretty full book of business. And so about 1.5 to 2 years, I would tell you. I mean, there is definitely a startup period.
After reflecting back on the success of your career, is there anything that you would have done differently?
I would have done it sooner. I would have done it sooner. I probably would have been bolder in terms of, bringing on more physicians, bringing on more satellites. As it was, we had 3 satellites and 11 docs. So, it was pretty big. But if I were to do it again, I would have done it bigger, better, faster.
We're talking to Sandra Weitz. She is an anesthesiologist and pain management specialist, and she wrote the Kevin MD article, "Fortune Favors the Bold, How a Physician Lives Up to That Motto." Sandra, as you know the statistics, fewer and fewer physicians are going into private practice. A lot of young doctors and residents are choosing employed models, partly because of the security, partly because of the lack of business acumen, and partly because they graduate with like almost $500,000 in loans. Now, for those who are on the fence and considering private practice, what's some advice that you could share with them?
Before I tell you that, let me tell you that when I finished, I had $300,000 in loans. And it wasn't until I went into private practice that I was able to effectively pay off those loans in less than 5 years. Okay. What I would tell you is that as a medical student, as a resident, as a young attending, while you're in that employed situation, learn your numbers, learn how to code, learn how they actually come up with a bill, so that you can evaluate whether you're an employed physician or going into private practice, right? Even if you're going to be employed, you have to negotiate a contract. How do you know how much you're worth if you don't know how to code and how much revenue you can generate? And for all of your listeners, it's super easy. Go to the Medicare fee schedule lookup, and you can look at your own codes that you bill on a daily basis and figure out, just ballpark, how much money does my job actually collect from the work that I'm doing? That will empower you to make a more educated decision. Going into private practice can be scary, but if you understand the risks and you come up with ways to mitigate those risks, that really is not nearly as scary as it seems.
And for those who want to follow in your footsteps or consider private practice, what other resources or mentors or books can you recommend?
I don't know that I have a book that teaches you how to do that. I mean, certainly, really and truly, mentors. There are people like me. There are multiple Facebook groups. There's my Facebook group, which is the Private Medical Practice Academy. If you listen to my podcast, I basically walk you through step by step how to figure out what place to put your practice, how to figure out the demographics, how to come up with the financials to project how long is it going to take you to ramp up. There are plenty of private practice doctors who are out there who are motivated to help you do this, because ultimately the reason that I wrote this article, the reason that I am desperate to get this message out there, is I'm petrified that there will not be doctors to take care of us when we all get old, because everybody's going, oh my God, this is so undoable. It's not undoable. It's actually something that anybody can accomplish.
And my final question, what's your take-home message that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
I think I just gave it to you. Really, empower yourself, take control of your medical practice, all right? And you can control your own destiny. This business of I'm burnt out, I'm miserable, I need some other side gig. You know what? We all have a unique set of talent. We all, we have a medical education. Take that medical education and actually learn the business of medicine and put it to work for you so that you can control your own life.
You mentioned you had a Facebook group and a podcast. How can people reach you?
So both the Facebook group and the podcast are called the Private Medical Practice Academy. They can also find me on my website, which is thepracticebuildingmd.com.
Sandra, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.